Dear audience across the world, you all are welcome to this podcast session on HD Live 24/7 on 2nd July, Sunday 2023. In this episode, I'm going to bring light to the ongoing unrest in France, which had initially erupted following the killing of a teenager of North African descent, who was tragically shot by the police, triggering widespread protests throughout the country. Rioters in France rammed the car into the home of the mayor of the town south of Paris, injuring his wife and one of his children, the mayor said Sunday. Mayor Vincent Jeanbrun wrote on Twitter that protesters rammed the car into his home before setting a fire while his family slept. French President Emmanuel Macron has postponed a trip to Germany due to begin on Sunday after a fortnight of rioting in cities across France, as family and friends have buried the teenager whose killing by police unleashed the unrest. The family of Nahel a 17-year-old of Algerian and Moroccan descent who was shot by a police officer during a traffic stop on Tuesday, held a private funeral at a mosque in Nanterre, a Paris suburb. Violent clashes continued on Friday night, despite a deployment of some 45,000 police officers backed by light armored vehicles, and a similar number of police will again be on the street on Saturday night, according to the Interior Ministry. The ministry said on Twitter that 1,211 people had been arrested overnight, compared with 875 the previous night, although it added the violence was lower in intensity. Justice Minister Eric Dupont already said 30% of the detainees were underage, alluding and writing two lies in the cities of Lens, Marseille and Grenoble, with bands of yachts pillaging shops, setting fires and pelting officers with projectiles. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said more than 700 shops, supermarkets, restaurants and bank branches had been ransacked, looted and sometimes even burned to the ground since Tuesday. Rioters in Marseille, France's second largest city, looted a gun store and stole hunting rifles but no ammunition, police said. Marseille's Mayor Bernard Payne called on the government to send extra troops to tackle pillaging and violence after 3 police officers were slightly wounded on Saturday. Events including 2 concerts at a Stade de France on the outskirts of Paris were cancelled, while LVMH-owned fashion house Celine cancelled its 2024 men's wear show on Sunday. This week, French police brutally killed a 17-year-old in broad daylight during a traffic stop. Police initially lied and accused the yacht of trying to run over an officer. And as is often the case, national media reported police fabrications as facts until cell phones video from a bystander showed the devastating truth. By now, people across the globe have been the horrific images of a French police brandishing rifles and menacing the occupants of a yellow vehicle in a Parisian suburb of Nanterre before summarily executing the teenage driver with a bullet to the head as he pulled away. Contrary to false claims by the police, no officer was standing in front of the car or physically threatened by the yacht driving away. Images of the shooting have produced what the classical French sociologist Émile Durkheim would call a shock to the collective conscience. Protests have erupted across the country, only to be met with the deployment of thousands of police officers, tear gas, and promises to restore public order. Unfortunately, it comes as no surprise that now the French teenager whose life was cut tragically short by police was of Algerian ancestry. France has a long and sordid history of colonial racism and violence against people racialized as non-white, and stretching from Haiti, Guadeloupe and Martinique in the Caribbean to Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. In North and West Africa, as well as Vietnam, among many other populations, France has ruthlessly oppressed Algerian people in particular, including those who are French citizens. Indeed, French colonialization of Algerian dates back to the early 1800s and involved a widespread use of brutal violence and mass killing to establish French rule. Tens of thousands of people had been marching in support of Algerian independence and in protest against a curfew that had been imposed to quell dissent. In response, police killed French Algerians in the streets, even drowning protesters in the river Seine. The youngest documented death was the death of another teenager, 15-year-old Fatima Beda, in an era well before smartphones. French authorities engaged in a brazen and largely successful cover-up that lasted for decades. It took more than 50 years for a French president to even acknowledge what happened. Even now, there's been no official apology. The historical context of colonial racism and the policing that led to the killing of Naho in Nanterre is largely absent from dominant accounts from white French politicians and media pundits alike. Now, the synopsis comes like that. Over 1,300 people were Now, overall synopsis is like this, and over 1,200 people were arrested during a fortnight of riots in France following the police shooting of Naho, and President Macron postponed his state visit to Germany. 45,000 police and armored vehicles were deployed to tackle the crisis, although the violence was less intense. And with this here, I'd like to sign off this podcast session on HD Live 2047, which is available now on YouTube, Facebook pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, etc. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Bye for now. Have a good time.